Hi, I'm Elena. At my wedding reception, I caught my sister Vanessa and fiancé Alex exchange a glance before she slipped something into my champagne like I wouldn't notice. I smiled, switched our glasses when she looked away, and watched her drink it instead. 15 minutes later, she excused herself, face flushed, eyes unfocused. They thought I was naive, but they had no idea I already knew about the offshore accounts, the forged signatures, and their plan to access my $8 million trust fund. Have you ever realized the people celebrating beside you are actually counting, down to your downfall? Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this and where from? Drop a comment below. This one gets dark. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The delicate chime of crystal flutes echoed across the grand ballroom. A string quartet played softly in the background, their melodies floating through the air like gossamer threads, beautiful yet somehow artificial. That's how the entire evening felt. Manufactured. The lighting was perfect, warm amber hues casting a golden glow across the reception hall. The centerpieces were elaborate arrangements of white orchids and calla lilies. And my name was spelled with 2 N's on the place card at the head table. Elena with 1 N, right? Vanessa had asked with that little smirk when the calligrapher was finalizing the seating arrangements. Always had been, I'd answered quietly, knowing full well she was aware. The celebration was for my wedding to Alex Morgan, the charming financial advisor with the perfect smile and impeccable credentials. But somehow the event felt like Vanessa's showcase, her production, her spotlight. Co-planner, she'd called herself to anyone who would listen. I paid for most of it. She selected the venue. I chose the menu. She approved the guest list. And Alex. He just nodded, flashed that camera-ready smile, and played the role of devoted groom to a room that didn't know any better. I'd spent the morning steaming my grandmother's lace veil and calming my jittery bridesmaids. My parents arrived early, my father immediately asking if Vanessa had selected the champagne. I said yes. They both smiled approvingly. By the time the cake-cutting ceremony concluded and Alex stood to make his toast, I was mentally cataloging the thank you notes I'd need to write the following week. Everyone, he began, standing tall and confident, his arm casually draped around Vanessa's shoulder like they were the ones who had just exchanged vows. Thank you all for being here to celebrate with us tonight. I looked up. He wasn't looking at me. His hand slid from Vanessa's shoulder to rest at the small of her back, lingering there with a familiarity that made my stomach tighten. Elena has been my rock, he continued, finally glancing in my direction. Through late nights preparing for this day, through every high and low, she's been the one constant in my life. That was the first time he'd said my name all evening. Vanessa stepped forward, lifting her glass. Her smile, practiced and polished, didn't reach her eyes. To my beautiful sister and her perfect new husband, she said, with a slight tilt of her head that made me feel like she was privy to a secret. I wasn't. Here's to eternal happiness and trust. I smiled back, thin and measured. My champagne flute, still untouched, sat just to my right. Alex reached over casually, switching it with the one in front of him. Yours looked fuller, he said, eyes twinkling. Vanessa chuckled, brushing her hand through her perfectly styled hair. He's always so thoughtful, she said, her voice honeyed. There it was. That tiny glitch, a flicker of something calculated in her gaze, a sideways glance too, quick to be innocent. And suddenly, I knew it wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. Earlier, I'd noticed Vanessa whisper something to Alex when she returned from the restroom. I'd also seen her hover near the champagne tower when she thought no one was watching. And now Alex was offering me a glass, his glass, with a champagne she'd been too close to. They thought I wouldn't notice, but I did. I didn't flinch. I nodded, reached slowly for the glass he'd placed near me, then, with a smooth motion, swapped it again when their attention was pulled to a toast from my college roommate at the far end of the table. My new glass was untouched and safe. Hers now contained whatever they had intended for me. 15 minutes later, Vanessa excused herself. Her movements were too deliberate, too controlled. "Just need to freshen up," she said, her voice strained. I watched her walk toward the exit, one hand steadying herself against the backs of chairs, the other clutching her designer clutch so tightly her knuckles whitened. My mother leaned toward Alex. "Is she feeling all right?" He just shrugged. "Probably. Too much champagne. You know how she gets." I said nothing. I glanced at the glass in front of me, the one she'd tried to direct toward my lips. I turned it slightly, pretending to admire the way the light caught the crystal. There was no need to inspect further. I already knew. You don't grow up as the overlooked sister and not learn to recognize manipulation, especially when it's wrapped in designer silk and masked with expensive perfume. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I stood just long enough to watch Vanessa disappear beyond the heavy doors leading to the hotel lobby. Her stilettos faltered slightly on the marble, but she maintained her posture like she'd been trained never to show weakness, only grace under pressure. I waited a few moments, dabbed my lips with my napkin, and quietly excused myself from the table. No one noticed. They rarely did. The hallway outside the ballroom was dimmer than I expected. Crystal sconces cast soft pools of light along the textured wallpaper, and the scent of roses and beeswax lingered in the air. Thick velvet drapes, at the end swayed slightly from a draft slipping through an exit door. I didn't come here to check on her. I came to confirm something I'd carried in my gut for months, a suspicion I'd dismissed as wedding jitters and prenuptial anxiety. But it had a pulse now, a heartbeat I couldn't ignore. As I rounded the corner near the coat check, voices drifted, from behind a service door left slightly ajar, low, urgent, hushed. "She didn't drink it," Vanessa hissed. I watched her. She switched the glasses. There was a pause. Then Alex's voice, tighter than I'd ever heard it, followed. "You said this would be simple. We can't wait until after the honeymoon, Vanessa. The trust fund terms change once she's married for 30 days. It has to be tonight." Every nerve in my body went still. Not tense, just hyper-aware, like my skin had become a receptor, collecting information that my mind had suspected, but my heart had refused to acknowledge. I took 2 steps back, positioning myself behind an elaborate floral arrangement, half hidden in shadow. "You think I don't know that?" Vanessa snapped, her breath coming faster. "She's not as clueless as we thought. I told you we should have done this months ago, before she started asking questions about the prenuptial agreement." My phone vibrated silently in my clutch. I slipped it open without looking down. A message preview flashed across the screen. Got the financial records. "You were right. All transfers trace back to offshore accounts in both their names. Call me when you can. Maya Patel. My best friend since law school, now a forensic accountant for one of the top firms in Boston. I'd reached out to her 4 weeks ago when I found something strange in our shared calendar app. Appointments with a wealth management firm I'd never heard of, scheduled on days Alex told me he was meeting clients. 2 months earlier, I was searching for the password to our streaming service when I discovered an email thread between Alex and Vanessa. It wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't even about me, not directly. It was coded, vague, but the subject line, inheritance, contingency, had stopped me cold. I remembered the weight that settled in my chest that night. The way I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the messages, hoping they might mean anything other than what they obviously did. Vanessa had introduced me to Alex. She'd orchestrated our chance meeting at the charity gala she insisted I attend. "He's perfect for you," she had gushed during that first holiday season. Successful, ambitious, exactly what you need. And I, always the accommodating sister, had smiled and trusted. That's what I'd been taught to do. Now I stood feet away from them, hearing what that trust had cost me. Alex sighed heavily. This is getting complicated. You promised she wouldn't suspect anything. Vanessa's heels clicked softly as she shifted her weight. We'll adapt. We still have the paperwork ready. Once we're named as trustees after the accident, we can still access everything. We just need a new approach. That's not what we agreed to. His voice dropped lower. I've spent 18 months on this. I'm not walking away with nothing. Their words blurred together after that. Not because I couldn't hear, but because I no longer needed to. I had enough. The champagne, the whispers, the emails. It wasn't paranoia or bridal nerves. It was betrayal, calculated and cold. I stepped forward, deliberate but quiet. My heels made just enough sound to alert them. They straightened like children caught stealing, eyes wide with momentary panic before their masks slid back into place. Vanessa, I said smoothly. You don't look well. Should we call for a car to take you home? She blinked rapidly. Alex flinched slightly. They didn't know what I'd heard, and that was my advantage. She opened her mouth to speak, maybe to offer an excuse or redirect my attention, but closed it again. Her hands fidgeted with her clutch, that designer thing she carried everywhere like an extension of herself. I'm fine, she finally said. Just a migraine coming on. You know how I get with champagne. I nodded, voice syrup sweet. Yes, funny how it affects people differently. Alex forced a chuckle, but it died halfway through. Maybe we should start saying goodbyes soon. It's getting late. I think that's a good idea. I smiled at both of them, holding their gaze just long enough. No need to overplay my hand. Behind me, the hallway stretched back to the ballroom. Doors. Music filtered through, something upbeat and celebratory that felt entirely disconnected from the moment. I didn't move immediately. I gave them just enough silence to wonder how much I'd heard, how much I knew. I felt their discomfort growing in the space between us. Alex didn't say a word. His mouth had opened slightly, just enough for me to see, calculation beneath his practiced charm. That silence told me more than any explanation ever could. I let it hang there, 3 long seconds of eye contact before I turned away and walked back toward the reception. The music was too cheerful for the weight I was carrying inside. People were laughing, clinking glasses, posing for photographs near the floral arch I had selected months ago. I forced one last smile, thanked the wedding planner, and made my excuses to leave early. Bridal exhaustion, I explained to concerned relatives. Alex will join me upstairs shortly. By the time I reached the presidential suite on the top floor of the Langham Hotel, the rain had started, gentle taps against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston skyline. City lights blurred through water-streaked glass, and the distant sound of traffic rose from 20 stories below. Inside, the room was quiet. The turned-down bed with rose petals scattered across the duvet looked like a scene from someone else's love story. I didn't touch them. I slipped off my wedding heels and walked straight to the desk by the window. No lights, just the blue glow from my laptop screen and the ambient shimmer of the city below. The shadows in the suite felt heavier than usual, like they knew too. I sat down and opened my clutch, retrieving the diamond tennis bracelet I'd worn for the ceremony. A wedding gift from my grandmother, though Alex had tried to claim credit for selecting it. The truth was simpler, and now crucial. Maya had modified it slightly after I shared my suspicions. The delicate clasp now housed a miniature recording device, activated by a subtle press of the center stone. I connected it to my laptop. The files loaded immediately. There it was. The clink of glasses. Alex leaning close. A pause. The flick of his eyes toward Vanessa. Then the hallway recording. Vanessa's voice. She didn't drink it. I watched her. She switched the glasses. Alex, you said this would be simple. We can't wait until after the honeymoon. My breath didn't catch. My eyes remained dry. I sat motionless, watching my own wedding day from a perspective I'd never imagined when I'd said yes to his proposal 1 year ago. I paused the video, rewound, played it again. Then I opened a document and began transcribing every word. It took 20 minutes. When I finished, I printed it using the suite's business center printer and slipped the pages into a hotel folder. In precise handwriting, I wrote a single word on the cover. Evidence. I turned toward my luggage, already packed for the Maldives honeymoon we were supposed to leave for tomorrow. Behind the lining of my carry-on, tucked beneath a false bottom, sat a waterproof portfolio. I removed it carefully. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd arranged it. On top, a copy of the trust fund documents my father had established for me on my 21st birthday. $2, $8 million to be released in full on my 30th birthday or after I had been married for 30 days, whichever came first. I turned 31 next month. Below that, copies of bank statements showing unusual wire transfers from Alex's personal account to a holding company I'd later discovered was registered in Vanessa's name. Transfers that began just 2 weeks after we announced our engagement. Next, a series of emails I'd recovered from Alex's cloud backup, messages he thought were permanently deleted, discussing the plan and the timeline with my sister. Their correspondence dated back 2 years, long before Alex and I had even met. I looked at the clock. 11:38 p.m. Still my wedding night, though not in any way I had envisioned. But I wasn't tired. I was clear-headed, like everything inside me had rearranged itself into perfect, crystalline focus. My phone rang. Maya's name flashed on the screen. "Elena," she said when I answered. "I've got everything, the offshore accounts, the backdated paperwork, even the insurance policy he took out on you 3 months ago. It's all here." I closed my eyes briefly. "And you're certain it will hold up?" "Absolutely. My team has verified everything twice. It's ironclad. Do you want me to contact Richardson tonight?" Thomas Richardson, my family's attorney for 3 generations, the executor of my trust, and the one person besides Maya who knew about my suspicions. "No," I said. "Let's wait until morning. I have one more thing to do tonight." We ended the call with nothing more than a quiet, "Be careful." But the silence after was deafening. I dressed methodically, exchanging my wedding gown for a simple, black dress. Professional. Composed. I removed the diamond earrings Alex had given me as a wedding present and replaced them with my mother's pearls. I swept my hair into a sleek ponytail and applied fresh lipstick, not the soft pink I'd worn for the ceremony, but a deeper shade. Battle armor. I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror before leaving. The woman staring back didn't flinch. She didn't need to. The rain had intensified, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. I grabbed my trench coat and took the elevator down to the lobby. The night manager nodded respectfully as I crossed the marble floor toward the bar, where I knew Alex would be not looking for me but celebrating with Vanessa before they came up with their next plan. The hotel bar was dimly lit, all dark wood and amber lighting. Live jazz played softly from the corner, the saxophonist lost in his own world of blue notes and improvisations. I spotted them immediately, huddled at a corner table, heads bent close, champagne bottle between them. Not the same one from the reception. A new bottle, their private celebration. I approached silently, sliding into the empty chair across from them before they realized I was there. Their faces registered shock, then poorly disguised panic. "Elena." Alex recovered first, his voice slipping into the smooth cadence he used with difficult clients. "We were just about to come find you. Vanessa was feeling better and wanted to apologize for missing the end of the reception. I placed my phone on the table, screen up, voice memo app open and recording. No subtlety needed now. Let's skip the part where you lie to me, I said quietly. I know about the offshore accounts in the Caymans. I know about the falsified trustee documents. I know about the life insurance policy you took out without my knowledge. I turned to Vanessa. And I know this has been planned since before you introduced us. The color drained from her face. Alex's hand, reaching for his glass, froze midair. Elena, Vanessa started, her voice higher than normal. You're not making any sense. It's been a long day, and clearly, the drugged champagne was a nice touch, I continued, cutting her off. What was it exactly? Something to make me seem unstable? Create a medical emergency? Or just keep me compliant while you both handled the paperwork? I kept my voice low, controlled. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Alex's posture changed, the charming facade slipping away to reveal something harder, colder. You don't understand what you're talking about. Don't I? I slid my phone closer to him. Everything you've just said is being recorded. Everything you say next will be too. So choose carefully. His jaw tightened. Vanessa's breathing quickened. Turn that off, she hissed. No. I met her gaze. You've been controlling the narrative my entire life, Vanessa. Not anymore. I reached into my coat pocket and removed a slim envelope, placing it beside my phone. Inside is a full report detailing every transaction between you two for the past 18 months. Every wire transfer, every email, every meeting. Maya has been quite thorough. Alex's eyes widened. At the mention of Maya's name, he knew her reputation. You had your friend spy on me? His attempt at indignation fell flat. I had a forensic accountant investigate financial irregularities, I corrected, which is exactly what the FBI will call it when they receive copies. Tomorrow morning. Vanessa's composure cracked. You wouldn't do that to your own sister. I tilted my head slightly. Wouldn't I? You were willing to drug me on my wedding day to access my trust fund. Where exactly should I draw the family? Loyalty line? The silence that followed was thick, charged. Alex reached for the envelope, but I pulled it back. This is your copy, I said. The originals are already with my attorney, along with instructions to proceed if anything happens to me. This is absurd, Alex tried again, but his voice lacked conviction. You're making wild accusations based on what? A few emails, meetings your sister and I had while planning your surprise honeymoon? I almost admired his commitment to the lie. Almost. The Maldives wasn't a surprise, Alex. We booked it together 6 months ago. I stood slowly. Here's what happens next. You both have 24 hours to transfer back every penny you've taken. Vanessa, you'll resign from the family foundation. Board. Alex, you'll sign annulment papers my attorney will have ready in the morning. Or what? Vanessa's voice was barely above a whisper. Or I don't just go to the FBI, I go to everyone, the clients whose money you've been mismanaging. The society pages you love so much, Dad's political connections. I leaned forward slightly. I wonder how your carefully curated image would handle a federal fraud investigation. Alex looked like he might be sick. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears, not of remorse, I knew, but of rage and frustration. You wouldn't survive the scandal? Either, she tried. Maybe not, I agreed, but I'd recover, with my trust fund intact and my conscience clean. Can you say the same? I picked up my phone, stopped the recording, and slipped it back into my pocket. 24 hours. I'll be at the Four Seasons under my maiden name. Choose wisely. I walked away without looking back, the sound of my heels against the marble floor steady and deliberate. Outside, the rain had softened to a gentle mist. I took a deep breath of the cool night air, feeling it fill my lungs completely for what felt like the first time in months. A taxi pulled up at my gesture. "Four Seasons, please," I told the driver. As we pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of them through the bar's window, still seated, stunned, their perfect plan unraveling. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt clarity. My wedding day had ended, but something else entirely had begun. The Four Seasons suite felt like sanctuary after the chaos of my wedding night. I kicked off my shoes and stood by the window, watching Boston's skyline shimmer through the lingering rain. No rose petals here, no champagne on ice, just clean lines, neutral tones, and blessed silence. I breathed deeply, feeling my shoulders relax for the first time in months. My phone vibrated. Maya again. "You're safe?" Her voice was calm but concerned. "Yes," I confirmed. "At the Four Seasons. They don't know I'm here." "Good. I've sent everything to Richardson. He'll meet you at 9 a.m. She paused. "Elena, are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we start, there's no turning back." I watched a plane's lights blink across the night sky, steady and determined. "They've been planning this for 2 years, Maya. My own sister. The man I was supposed to spend my life with." My voice didn't waver. "There's already no turning back." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and navigated to my cloud storage. Time to go deeper. The first folder contained screenshots of text messages between Alex and Vanessa dating back 18 months. Messages they thought were deleted, but had been backed up to his cloud account, the one I had access to because he'd used my laptop to set it up and never signed out. She has no idea about the trust's full value. Father kept her in the dark. Deliberately. Vanessa, 14 months ago. Paperwork is ready. Once we're married, 30-day countdown begins. Alex, 6 months ago. Make sure she takes the full dose this time. Last attempt barely made her drowsy. Vanessa, 3 weeks ago. I hadn't connected the dots then. The night I mysteriously fell asleep at dinner and woke up with signed papers I barely remembered reviewing. Now it made sickening sense. Next, financial records. Wire transfers, account openings in the Cayman Islands, a shell company established under both their names. The paper trail was complex but clear when you knew what to look for. Maya's forensic expertise had mapped it all. Money moving from Alex's accounts to offshore holdings, then filtered through Vanessa's design business, emerging clean on the other side. Seed money, I realized. Capital for their real plan. The third folder was the hardest to open. Wedding preparations, emails, vendor contracts, guest lists. Every decision I thought we'd made together, every choice I believed was ours, revealed as calculated steps in their scheme. Destination wedding too risky. Need controlled environment for exit strategy. Alex to Vanessa, 9 months ago. Booked honeymoon suite with separate access point as discussed. Vanessa to Alex, 3 months ago. Medical contact confirmed. Will attribute symptoms to anxiety exhaustion if necessary. Alex to Vanessa, 2 weeks ago. I leaned back, letting the truth settle into my bones. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the elaborate performance. The patient, methodical deception. How many dinners had we shared where they exchanged knowing glances? How many family gatherings had been rehearsals for them? At 3 a.m., I switched to my second investigation task. I pulled up the trust fund documents my father had established when I turned 21. The language was complex, full of legal terminology designed to protect the family fortune, but I'd studied it carefully since finding those first suspicious emails. The trust became fully accessible under 2 conditions: reaching age 30, or after 30 days of marriage, whichever came first. My 30th birthday had passed last year, but the full release required formal application through the trustee, my father's attorney, Thomas Richardson. Alex and Vanessa knew I hadn't, yet applied for the full release. I'd been content with the quarterly stipend, focused on building my own interior design business, rather than accessing the principal. That patience had inadvertently thwarted their timeline. When the plan to have me sign documents during our drowsy dinner hadn't worked completely, they'd moved to the wedding day attempt. Get me incapacitated, have me sign transfer paperwork in a confused state, make it look like a wedding night accident if things went wrong. I clicked to another folder, life insurance. The policy Alex had taken out on me was substantial. $3 million, effective immediately upon our marriage. Beneficiary, Alex Morgan. Secondary beneficiary in case of simultaneous death, Vanessa Blackwood. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. I closed the laptop. Sleep wasn't an option, not with adrenaline still coursing through my system. Instead, I drew a bath, letting hot water and lavender salts create the illusion of normalcy. As I soaked, I mentally prepared for the morning meeting with Richardson. No tears, no wavering, just facts and action. The woman in the mirror as I dressed the next morning looked different, calmer, more focused. I chose a tailored navy suit, not black, too funereal, not gray, too timid. Navy for strength, for clarity, for the ocean depths that concealed so much beneath a smooth surface. Thomas Richardson's office occupied the 14th floor of a glass tower in Boston's financial district. The firm of Richardson, Dawes & Hirsch had represented my family for 3 generations. Their reception area spoke of old money and discretion, leather-bound, books, oriental rugs over hardwood floors, paintings by artists just famous enough to signal wealth without ostentation. Ms. Blackwood, the receptionist greeted me, pointedly using my maiden name. Mr. Richardson is expecting you. Richardson stood as I entered, his tall frame unfolding from behind an imposing mahogany desk. At 68, he remained sharp, his silver hair and penetrating gaze lending him an air of authority that had intimidated me as a child. Now, I found it reassuring. Elena, he said, forgoing his usual formality. I've reviewed everything. He gestured to the open folders on his desk, copies of what Maya had sent overnight. I must say I'm deeply disturbed. As am I said, taking the seat he offered. Your father trusted me to protect your interests. I feel I've failed in that duty by not seeing this sooner. I shook my head. They were careful. They planned for years. Nevertheless, he adjusted his glasses. I've taken immediate protective measures. The trust is secured. No transactions can proceed without my personal verification and your in-person authorization with biometric confirmation. Relief washed through me. Thank you. Now, he continued, we have several paths forward. I've outlined them here. He slid a document across the desk. Option 1 is entirely legal, annulment, financial recovery, and private resolution. Option 2 introduces law enforcement. Option 3 is more comprehensive. I scanned the document, appreciating his thoroughness. I want to pursue option 3. He studied me carefully. It will be public, messy. There will be questions about your judgment. I understand. I met his gaze steadily. But this isn't just about me. How many others has Alex done this to? How many more might they target? This stops now. Richardson nodded slowly. Very well. I'll make the calls. He hesitated. Your parents should be informed before this proceeds. My parents. The thought of them learning about Vanessa's betrayal sent a pang through my chest. My father's health had been fragile since his heart attack last year. My mother's devotion to maintaining family appearances was legendary. I'll tell them myself, I said. Today. Would you like me to be present? I considered it, then shook my head. This needs to come from me alone. As I stood to leave, Richardson asked one final question. Elena, did you ever suspect, before the evidence appeared? I paused at the door. There were moments, comments that didn't quite align. Glances that lasted too long. But I dismissed them because I trailed off. Because they were family, he finished. Yes. I nodded. Because I couldn't imagine someone plotting so patiently against someone they claimed to love. My parents' Beacon Hill townhouse stood elegant and imposing against the morning sky, its red brick facade and black shutters speaking of old Boston money and careful preservation. The home where Vanessa and I had grown up, sharing a childhood that now felt like fiction. My mother answered the door herself, unusual, as the housekeeper typically greeted visitors. Elena? Surprise colored her voice. Darling, what are you doing here? You should be at the hotel with Alex, preparing for your flight. She wore her standard uniform of tailored slacks and a cashmere sweater, her silver-streaked hair swept into a perfect chignon. Margaret Blackwood, always composed, always appropriate. I need to speak with you and Dad, I said, stepping past her into the foyer. It's important. Concern crossed her face. He's in his study. Is everything all right? Where's Alex? That's part of what we need to discuss. I found my father in his usual spot, ensconced in his leather chair by the window, newspaper spread across his lap. William Blackwood, once formidable in Boston's financial circles, now seemed smaller, more fragile since his heart attack. But his mind remained sharp, his gaze analytical as I entered. Elena? He folded the newspaper. This is unexpected. William, something's wrong, my mother said, following me in. She won't say what. I took a seat across from them, arranging my thoughts carefully. No emotional outbursts, no accusations, just facts. The wedding was beautiful, my father began, filling the silence. Vanessa outdid herself with the arrangements. Of course he would credit Vanessa. It had always been that way. Dad, Mom, I started, my voice steady. I'm not on my honeymoon because I won't be married to Alex. I'm pursuing an annulment, effective immediately. My mother gasped. Elena, what are you saying? After all the planning, the expense. Margaret, my father cut her off, his eyes never leaving my face. Let her speak. I reached into my briefcase and removed a thin folder. This contains evidence that Alex and Vanessa have been conspiring for nearly 2 years. Their plan was to access my trust fund through marriage, then arrange for an accident, once the 30-day marriage period had secured their access. My mother's hand flew to her throat. This is absurd. Your own sister would never— Please review the documents, I interrupted, sliding the folder toward them. Bank records, emails, text messages, a life insurance policy taken out without my knowledge, and evidence of multiple attempts to drug me, including at our wedding reception yesterday. My father took the folder, opened it slowly. His expression remained impassive as he examined the first page, then the second. My mother, peering over his shoulder, shook her head in denial. These could be fabricated, she insisted. Taken out of context. They're authenticated, I said. Maya Patel verified everything. Thomas Richardson has the complete file. At the mention of Richardson, my father's posture changed subtly. He knew Richardson wouldn't be involved unless the evidence was irrefutable. When did you discover this? He asked quietly. I began to suspect something was wrong about 3 months ago. Small inconsistencies, changes in Alex's behavior, documents I didn't remember signing. I kept my voice clinical, detached. I asked Maya to look into it quietly. What she found led me to monitor more closely, which is when I discovered the extent of their plan. My father continued reading, his face growing paler with each page. My mother had stopped her protests, her hand now pressed against her mouth. "The champagne," she whispered. "At the reception. Vanessa insisted on handling it personally." "Yes," I confirmed. "I saw her slip something into my glass. I switched it when they weren't looking." My father looked up sharply. "She drank it. Instead?" I nodded. "That's why she left the reception early. The dose was meant to make me compliant, confused, easy to manipulate into signing documents." He closed the folder, his hands trembling slightly. Not from age or illness, I realized, but from rage. "Where is Vanessa now?" he asked. "I don't know. Probably with Alex, trying to salvage their plan." I leaned forward. "Dad, Mom, I'm moving forward with legal action, criminal charges for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted poisoning. It will become public." My mother stood abruptly. "You can't. Think of the family name, the foundation, your father's reputation." "Margaret." My father's voice was soft but firm. "Our daughter was nearly harmed by people she trusted. The family name is not the priority here." The shock on my mother's face would have been comical in any other context. William Blackwood, always conscious of appearances, choosing truth over reputation. "I've already secured the trust," I continued. "But this isn't just about money. It's about accountability." My father nodded slowly. "You're right." He turned to my mother. "Margaret, please call Dr. Lieberman. I'd like him to examine Vanessa when she's found. I want to understand if there's a medical explanation for this behavior." Always looking for rational explanations, my father. Always believing there must be a logical reason for the inexplicable. "And Elena," he continued, "I owe you an apology. I've been blind to certain patterns for too long." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. My mother moved to answer it, composing herself with visible effort. Voices in the foyer, then footsteps. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, Alex half a step behind her. Both looked impeccable. She in a cream-colored dress, he in a tailored suit. Both wore expressions of practiced concern. "There you are!" Vanessa exclaimed, rushing toward me. "We've been so worried. Alex went to the hotel room this morning and you were gone." She reached for my hands. I stepped back. "Don't," I said quietly. She froze, confusion crossing her features. Then her eyes darted to the folder on the table between our parents. Understanding dawned, followed by something darker. "What have you done?" she whispered. "Told the truth," I replied. Alex moved forward, his charm offensive ready. "Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Blackwood, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Elena was very upset last night, understandably emotional. After the wedding..." "Stop." My father's voice cut through the room like a blade. "I've seen the evidence, Alex. All of it." Alex's facade cracked slightly. "Sir, I don't know what Elena has told you, but the offshore accounts?" My father raised an eyebrow. "The life insurance policy? The drugged champagne? Which part are you planning to explain away?" Vanessa's composure slipped further. "Daddy, you can't possibly believe—" "I believe the evidence," he interrupted. "And I believe my eyes. I watched you at the reception, Vanessa. I saw how you hovered near the champagne. I dismissed it then. I won't dismiss it now." My mother remained silent, her gaze fixed on Vanessa with dawning horror. Alex straightened, abandoning the charade. "This is a private matter between Elena and me, a marital dispute that's been blown out of proportion." "It ceased being private when you conspired to defraud my daughter," my father said coldly. "And it's not a marriage when one party entered it under false pretenses with criminal intent." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. Calculated, I knew from years of watching her perfect the art of emotional manipulation. "Elena, please. Whatever you think happened, we can talk about this as a family. There's no need for lawyers or accusations. Actually, I said, Thomas Richardson is expecting us at his office in 30 minutes. Detective Suarez from the Financial Crimes Unit will be joining us. They're both particularly interested in the evidence of premeditation. The color drained from Alex's face. You're bluffing. No, I said calmly. I'm proceeding with exactly what I told you would happen if you didn't return every penny and walk away. Vanessa turned to our parents, desperation evident. Mom? Dad? You can't let her do this. It will destroy everything. The foundation. Our standing in the community. Think of the scandal. My mother finally spoke, her voice hollow. I raised you better than this, Vanessa. You raised me to understand that appearances matter, Vanessa snapped. To know that our position in society requires maintenance. Elena never cared about any of that. She was content to live in her little design studio bubble while I managed everything else. The connections, the social obligations, the family image. So this was what? I asked. Punishment? Revenge because I didn't value the things you did. It was correction, she hissed. You were squandering opportunities. The trust fund, the family name, the connections, wasting them on pro bono work and artsy friends while I did the heavy lifting of maintaining our social position. The raw honesty of her answer stunned me. Not greed alone, but resentment. Years of it, festering beneath designer clothes and perfect smiles. Alex checked his watch, calculating. We can still resolve this privately. A settlement, perhaps. Financial restitution in exchange for discretion. My father stood, steady despite his weakened heart. You'll make restitution regardless. The only question is whether you do it through voluntary surrender of assets or after a criminal conviction. The confrontation might have continued, but the doorbell rang again. This time, the housekeeper answered. A moment later, Thomas Richardson appeared in the doorway, accompanied by a woman in a crisp suit who I recognized from her profile photo, Detective Suarez. I hope you don't mind me coming here, Richardson said, addressing me. When you didn't arrive at the office, I grew concerned. Perfect timing, actually, I replied. We were just discussing options. Detective Suarez assessed the room with a professional gaze. Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, I'm Detective Suarez, Financial Crimes Division. I'd like to ask you some questions regarding certain transactions flagged by our department. It's still Ms. Blackwood, I corrected, and Mr. Morgan and I are in the process of annulment. Alex's lawyer mask slipped into place. I'm not answering any questions without my attorney present. That's your right, Suarez acknowledged, though it does make things more complicated. Vanessa moved closer to Alex. Her earlier tears vanished. This is a family misunderstanding. Detective, nothing more. Attempted poisoning crosses the line from misunderstanding to criminal activity, Suarez replied evenly, as does conspiracy to commit fraud. My father stepped forward. Detective Mr. Richardson, perhaps we could continue this conversation in my study. I believe Elena has provided you with the relevant documents. As they moved toward the door, I caught Vanessa's eye. The mask had completely dropped now, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. Something that had perhaps always been there, hidden beneath sisterly smiles and childhood memories. You won't win this, she said, quietly, for my ears alone. You've never had the stomach for ugly fights. I held her gaze steadily. That's where you've always been wrong about me, Vanessa. I never fought because I never saw the point in crushing someone I loved. But now? I smiled slightly. Now I see the point very clearly. I turned away, following Richardson and Detective Suarez into my father's study, leaving Vanessa and Alex in the living room with my mother's silent disappointment and their crumbling plan. The woman I'd been 24 hours ago, the trusting bride in white lace, felt like a stranger now. In her place stood someone new. Someone who understood that sometimes the greatest strength isn't in trusting blindly, but in seeing clearly, even when the truth hurts. And as I closed the study door behind me, I realized that some weddings aren't beginnings at all. Sometimes they're liberations. The next 3 weeks unfolded like a carefully orchestrated chess match. Detective Suarez moved with precision, building the case methodically while Richardson ensured every legal avenue was covered. I watched it all with a strange detachment, as if observing someone else's life drama from a comfortable distance. The Four Seasons became my temporary sanctuary. I worked remotely, managing my design clients with practiced professionalism, never letting on that my personal life had imploded. By day, I selected fabric swatches and approved furniture layouts. By night, I reviewed case documents and prepared for depositions. The duality was oddly grounding. "You're handling this remarkably well," Maya commented one evening as we shared dinner in my suite. Rain streaked the windows, turning Boston's skyline into a watercolor of blurred lights. "What's the alternative?" I asked, refilling our wine glasses. "Collapse? Hide? Give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken?" Maya studied me over the rim of her glass. "There's resilience, and then there's detachment. I'm just making sure you're processing, not postponing." I considered her words. Was I postponing grief? Maybe. But something else had taken root inside me. Something that felt less like denial and more like transformation. "I'm not the same person I was 3 weeks ago," I said finally. "The woman who walked down that aisle believing in fairy tales and happy endings? She's gone. I'm not mourning her yet because I'm still discovering who's replaced her." Maya nodded. Slowly. "Fair enough. Just don't become so armored that you can't feel anything." Later that night, after Maya left, I stood at the window watching lightning illuminate the cityscape in brief, brilliant flashes. My phone buzzed with a text from Richardson. "Discovery proceeds tomorrow. Prepare for disclosures." I didn't reply. Immediately. Discovery. The legal process where both sides exchange evidence. The moment when Alex and Vanessa would see exactly how much evidence we had assembled. The beginning of the real battle. My reflection stared back at me from the rain-spattered glass, eyes clear and determined. I texted back a simple ready. The law offices of Simmons and Wexler occupied a corner suite in a building that screamed new money, all glass and steel and modern art that tried too hard to impress. Alex's attorney, James Wexler, had a reputation for aggressive defense strategies and creative interpretations of financial disclosure laws. The perfect match for someone like Alex. I arrived early, accompanied by Richardson and our litigation specialist, Sarah Chen. The conference room featured an oval table that seemed designed to eliminate the concept of sides, a psychological tactic I recognized from my years designing corporate spaces. "Don't engage directly," Richardson reminded me quietly. "Everything through us, no matter what they say." I nodded, arranging my notepad precisely parallel to the table edge. Control in small things, order amid chaos. They arrived together, Alex, Vanessa, Wexler, and a woman I didn't recognize but assumed was Vanessa's attorney. Alex wore his courtroom suit, charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe. Vanessa had chosen cream again, her armor of innocence. No one shook hands. "Let's keep this professional," Wexler began, his voice carrying the practiced smoothness of someone accustomed to diffusing tensions. "We're here to exchange discovery materials and establish parameters for moving forward." Richardson smiled, thinly. Indeed, professionalism would be refreshing. The subtle dig wasn't lost on Wexler, whose smile tightened imperceptibly. "My clients maintain that this entire situation stems from a misunderstanding, exacerbated by pre-wedding stress and family dynamics. Your clients attempted to poison my client, established fraudulent financial instruments, and conspired to commit theft of substantial assets, Chen responded, her tone making it clear how ridiculous she found their position. But we're not here to argue interpretation. We're here to exchange evidence. I kept my expression neutral as Richardson slid thick folders across the table. Our complete discovery package, as required. Financial records, authenticated communications, witness statements, and forensic analysis of the substance found in the champagne glass Ms. Blackwood preserved from the wedding reception. Vanessa's eyes widened slightly at the mention of the champagne analysis. She hadn't known I'd kept the glass. Wexler opened the first folder, scanning its contents with practiced indifference that faltered as he turned pages. Beside him, Vanessa's attorney, who had introduced herself as Catherine. Morris was having a similar reaction. "We'll need time to review these materials," Morris said, closing her folder. "Of course," Richardson agreed pleasantly. "And we look forward to receiving your client's discovery package." Wexler cleared his throat. "We have some procedural objections to the scope of discovery being requested." "Save it, James," Chen interrupted. "Judge Hernandez already ruled on scope. You're stalling." While the attorneys sparred, I allowed myself to study Alex and Vanessa. Alex maintained his composure, though the muscle twitching in his jaw betrayed his tension. Vanessa alternated between examining her manicure and shooting venomous glances in my direction. I didn't look away when our eyes met. I didn't flinch. I simply observed her with the clinical detachment of someone studying a particularly interesting biological specimen. Her hatred was palpable, but it couldn't touch me now. "Ms. Blackwood," Wexler suddenly addressed me directly, "my clients are prepared to offer a settlement that would avoid the unpleasantness of a public trial. Full financial restitution, a confidentiality agreement, and separate paths forward." Richardson started to intervene, but I placed a hand lightly on his arm. "Mr. Wexler," I replied, my voice steady, "your clients had an opportunity to return what they took and walk away. That window closed 3 weeks ago." I smiled politely. "But I appreciate the acknowledgement that they have something to return." Wexler's expression hardened. "This approach benefits no one. A court battle will be costly, time-consuming, and damaging to everyone's reputation." "Not everyone's," I corrected. "Only those who committed fraud and attempted poisoning. My reputation will survive contact with the truth. Can your client say the same?" "Elena," Vanessa broke her silence, her voice taking on the wheedling tone she'd perfected in childhood. "We're family. Do you really want to drag our parents through this? Dad's heart is stronger than your ethics," I finished for her. "And he's fully supportive of this proceeding. In fact, he's provided a sworn statement detailing your pattern of financial manipulation, including the foundation funds you've been misappropriating for years." The color drained from Vanessa's face. Our father's statement was news to her, and clearly devastating. She'd always been his favorite, or so everyone thought. The golden child who could do no wrong. "You're bluffing," she whispered. I slid a document across the table. "See for yourself." She snatched it up, scanning the pages with increasing desperation. Our father's elegant handwriting filled the margins with additional notes beside his formal statement. Dates, amounts, observations about Vanessa's behavior patterns stretching back years. "He wouldn't," she insisted, but her voice had lost its conviction. "He did," I replied simply, "because unlike you, he values truth over appearances." Alex, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. "This vendetta isn't just about the trust fund anymore, is it?" I turned to him, genuinely curious. "Was it ever? You spent 2 years integrating yourself into my life, learning my habits, my vulnerabilities, my dreams. You stood at an altar and vowed to love and protect me while planning how to destroy me." I tilted my head slightly. "Did you really think that was just about money?" He had no answer. None of them did. The meeting concluded shortly after, with agreements on procedural matters and deadlines for additional disclosures. As we gathered our materials to leave, Vanessa made one last attempt. "Mother sends her love," she said, the barb thinly veiled. "She's devastated by your choices." I knew what she was doing, invoking our mother, who had indeed been struggling with the public nature of the proceedings. Margaret Blackwood valued appearances above almost everything. Almost. "Interesting," I replied. "When I had breakfast with her yesterday, she seemed more devastated by your betrayal than by my pursuit of justice. But I'm sure you two have different relationships with her." It was a small victory, watching Vanessa's smug expression falter. But I didn't need victories anymore. I needed resolution. Outside, rain had given way to weak sunshine. I turned my face toward it, breathing deeply. "You did well in there," Chen commented, falling into step beside me. Did I? I wasn't sure what well meant in a situation like this. "You stayed focused, didn't take the bait, kept the higher ground." She smiled slightly. "Makes our job easier when clients don't self-sabotage." Richardson, walking on my other side, added, "The forensic results from the champagne glass were particularly effective. Midazolam mixed with something our lab is still identifying, possibly a compound that would have interacted with alcohol, to create memory gaps." They wanted me confused enough to sign documents, but functional enough to appear merely tired or emotional, I mused. Not enough to raise immediate medical concerns, just enough to make me compliant. "And create reasonable doubt if questioned later," Chen agreed. "Clever, if horrifying." "What happens next?" I asked as we reached the car. Richardson checked his watch. "Now we wait for their counter-move. They'll try to suppress evidence, claim marital privilege, muddy the waters. But with the champagne analysis and your father's statement..." He shook his head. "They're in a difficult position." Later that afternoon, I received an unexpected call. The display showed my mother's private line, not the house phone, but her personal cell reserved for family emergencies. "Mom?" I answered, immediately concerned. "Is everything okay, Dad?" "Your father is fine," she interrupted, her voice tight. "Physically, at least. Elena, Vanessa is here. She's making accusations." My stomach tightened. "What kind of accusations?" "She says you've fabricated evidence, that you've been jealous of her relationship with your father for years and are using this situation to destroy her." My mother's voice wavered slightly. "She claims you've been planning this since she introduced you to Alex, that you deliberately set them up to appear conspiratorial." The audacity was breathtaking. "And does Dad believe her?" A pause. "No. But she's very convincing, Elena. She's crying. She brought documents. Emails she says prove you orchestrated everything." Of course she had. Vanessa never came to a battle unarmed. "Do you believe her?" I asked quietly. Another pause, longer this time. "I don't know what to believe anymore. My daughters. How did we get here? What did I miss?" The pain in her voice was real. For all her focus on appearances, Margaret Blackwood loved her children. She had simply never understood that love without clear sight isn't enough. "I'm coming over," I decided. "Don't let her leave. Tell Dad to secure any documents she brought. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I called Richardson from the car, briefing him on the situation. "She's trying to divide my parents, create doubt. Classic Vanessa. Do you want me to meet you there?" he offered. I considered it, then declined. This part I need to handle myself. The family home looked the same as always, stately, immaculate, timeless. But walking through the front door felt like entering a battlefield. Tension hung in the air, thick enough to touch. I found them in the formal living room, my father in his armchair, mother perched on the edge of the sofa. Vanessa standing by the fireplace in a pose so practiced it might have been amusing under different circumstances. 3 heads turned as I entered. "Elena," my mother began, then faltered. "I came as soon as Mom called," I said, addressing my father directly. "I understand Vanessa has brought some documents she claims are evidence." My father nodded toward the coffee table where a folder lay open. "Emails primarily. Between you and Alex, apparently discussing how to frame Vanessa for financial misconduct." I approached the table calmly, picked up the first page, and scanned it. "May I?" I asked, pulling out my phone. At my father's nod, I photographed each document, then sent the images to Maya with a brief text. "Fabricated emails Vanessa just presented. Analysis needed ASAP." "Well?" Vanessa prompted, her voice steady despite the tear tracks on her cheeks. "Nothing to say about your own words?" I replaced the documents carefully. "These aren't my words. These emails are fabricated." Vanessa laughed bitterly. "Of course you'd say that. Just like I supposedly fabricated the evidence against me, right? It's always someone else's fault in Elena's world. The difference," I replied evenly, "is that I have forensic authentication of my evidence. Richardson's team verified digital signatures, metadata, and server logs. Can you say the same for these?" Doubt flickered across my mother's face. My father simply watched, his expression unreadable. "Your jealousy has finally consumed you," Vanessa continued, ignoring my question. "You couldn't stand that Dad and I share a special bond, that Alex and I had a natural friendship. You've always needed to be the center of attention with your perfect grades and your artistic talent and your quiet superiority." The accusation was so wildly disconnected from reality that I almost laughed. I, the child who had grown up in Vanessa's shadow, who had learned to speak softly because Vanessa always needed the spotlight, was supposedly jealous? "Is that what you told yourself?" I asked gently. "That I was jealous? Not that I was concerned. When I found evidence you were siphoning money from the foundation? Not that I was suspicious when my fiancé and sister spent hours in private meetings about my trust fund? Not that I was alarmed when I kept experiencing unexplained drowsiness after drinks you insisted on preparing?" My phone buzzed with Maya's response. "Preliminary analysis. Emails definitely doctored. Headers inconsistent with genuine Google server format. Will send detailed report in 30 minutes." I showed the message to my father, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Vanessa," he said quietly, "I think it's time for you to leave." She froze. "What?" "You heard me." His voice remained soft but carried absolute authority. "You've brought falsified documents into my home, attempting to manipulate your mother. And me against your sister. You've abused our trust for the last time." Vanessa's composure shattered. "You can't possibly believe her over me. After everything I've done for this family, for your precious foundation, for your social standing." "That's exactly the problem," my father interrupted. "You've never understood that those things aren't what matter most." "To you, maybe," she snapped. "But Mother understands. Don't you, Mom? Tell him how important our position is, how everything I've done has been to protect what we've built." My mother stood slowly, her elegant posture suddenly rigid. "What we've built," she said carefully, "is a family, not a social construct. Not a foundation, a family." She shook her head. "And you've put that in jeopardy for what? Money you would have inherited anyway? Position you already had?" "You don't understand," Vanessa insisted. "Elena was going to change everything. Her ideas about redirecting foundation funds to community projects, her plans to sell the vacation properties. She was dismantling our legacy piece by piece." I blinked in surprise. "Is that what this was about? My suggestions to the foundation board?" "They weren't suggestions. They were threats to everything we stand for." Vanessa's voice rose. You and your progressive ideas about wealth redistribution and community investment. Do you know how hard our family worked to establish our position? How many generations it took to build what we have? My father looked genuinely puzzled. Vanessa, the foundation's purpose has always been community investment. That's why I established it. The foundation's purpose is to enhance our family's standing while appearing philanthropic, she corrected. It's about influence, not charity. The room fell silent as the truth of Vanessa's worldview finally emerged, naked and unadorned. She truly believed that appearances were reality, that social position was the ultimate goal, that our family's purpose was to accumulate and display status rather than to live with meaning. My mother sank back onto the sofa, suddenly looking every one of her 63 years. "Where did we go wrong with you?" she whispered. Vanessa laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Wrong? I'm the only one who got it right. Elena lives in her fantasy world of meaningful work and authentic connections. You and Dad pretend that your wealth doesn't define you. I'm the realist." "You're a criminal," my father said quietly. "And you're no longer welcome in this house until you take responsibility for your actions." The finality in his voice seemed to reach Vanessa in a way nothing else had. She stared at him, stricken, then gathered her purse with trembling hands. "You'll regret this," she said, but the threat sounded hollow, even to her own ears. "When this becomes public, when your friends at the club are whispering about your criminal daughter, they'll be discussing the daughter who committed fraud, not the one who exposed it," my father finished for her. "Now please leave." She turned to me, hatred burning in her eyes. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," I replied softly. "It was over the moment you decided I was an obstacle rather than your sister." After she left, the three of us sat in silence for several long minutes. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily, marking time in a world that suddenly felt altered. "I never saw it," my mother finally said. "All these years I never saw who she really was." My father reached for her hand. "None of us did. We saw what we wanted to see." "I did," I admitted. "Sometimes. Glimpses of something cold beneath the perfect smile, moments of calculation behind the sisterly concern. But I dismissed them because I trailed off. Because it's easier to believe in the family you wish you had than to face the one you actually do," my father finished. The wisdom in his words struck me deeply. How much of my life had been spent trying to fit into a family narrative that never truly existed? How many compromises had I made to maintain the illusion of harmony? "What happens now?" my mother asked, her voice small. "Now," I said, standing to embrace her, "we rebuild. Not appearances, not positions, but truth. A family founded on what's real, even when it's imperfect." My father joined our embrace, his arms encircling us both. "I'm sorry, Elena," he murmured. "For every time I didn't see you clearly. For every time I favored Vanessa's flash over your substance." Tears stung my eyes, not from sadness, but from the profound relief of finally being seen. Really seen. "I need to call Richardson," said eventually, stepping back. "He should know about these fabricated emails." "Of course," my father nodded. "And Elena? Whatever happens with the legal proceedings, whatever becomes public, your mother and I stand with you, completely." That evening, as I drove back to the hotel, Boston's skyline glittered against the twilight sky. Traffic moved in orderly streams, pedestrians hurried along sidewalks, the city's rhythm continuing as if nothing had changed. But everything had. I wasn't just fighting for my trust fund anymore. I wasn't even fighting against Vanessa and Alex. I was fighting for something more fundamental, the right to live in truth, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might be. My phone rang through the car's speakers. "Maya. I've completed the Analysis, she said without preamble. Those emails are definitively fake. Crude work, actually. They didn't even bother masking the creation date in the metadata. They were generated yesterday. Send everything to Richardson, I instructed. This changes the dynamic. Already done. She paused. Elena, there's something else. I've been digging deeper into Alex's history based on some irregularities in his financial records. He's done this before. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. What do you mean? 3 years ago, different name, different city. He was engaged. To a woman in Chicago, daughter of a manufacturing executive. The engagement ended abruptly, and he left town shortly after. No charges filed, but there were police reports suggesting financial impropriety. He's a professional con man, I realized. And Vanessa? Unclear if she knew his history, Maya admitted. But they definitely connected before he coincidentally met you. Social media places them at the same charity event in New York 6 months before Vanessa introduced you. The final pieces clicked into place. Not just opportunistic betrayal, but a calculated long-term con, with Vanessa as either accomplice or co-architect. Send everything to Richardson and Detective Suarez, I said, pulling into the hotel parking garage. And Maya, thank you for believing me from the beginning. Always, she replied simply. As I rode the elevator up to my suite, I reflected on how different this homecoming felt from my wedding night. No bouquet to preserve, no gifts to catalog, no thank you notes to write. Instead, I carried the weight of truths revealed and battles still to come. But I also carried something else, a growing sense of liberation. The facades had fallen away. The pretenses had crumbled. What remained was stark reality, painful but clean. And in that clean pain, I was finding a strength I never knew I possessed. The Elena who had walked down the aisle 3 weeks ago had been willing to compromise herself to fit into someone else's narrative. The woman who now stood in her place understood that no relationship, no family connection, no social position was worth the sacrifice of her truth. Tomorrow would bring more legal meetings, more revelations, more difficult conversations. The path ahead wasn't easy or clean, but it was mine. Authentically, completely mine. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was walking, it with eyes wide open. 6 months can change everything. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, intimate almost, with polished oak benches and soft natural light filtering through high windows. I sat beside Richardson, back straight, hands folded neatly on the table before me. Across the aisle, Alex sat alone. No Vanessa, no Wexler, just Alex in a suit that looked slightly too large for him now, his former confidence replaced by a hollowed-out resignation. Judge Hernandez entered, and we all rose. Her reputation for no-nonsense efficiency had expedited our case through a system designed for delay. She nodded once, took her seat, and the final hearing of Morgan versus Blackwood began. How strange to hear our names juxtaposed that way, the marriage that never truly existed reduced to a legal formality in need of dissolution. The annulment had been granted months ago, but the criminal and civil proceedings had taken longer, winding through. The system like a slow, methodical river carving its path through stone. In the matter of financial restitution, Judge Hernandez began, the court has reviewed the settlement proposal submitted by Mr. Morgan. Ms. Blackwood, your counsel has indicated you find these terms acceptable? Richardson stood. Yes, Your Honor. My client agrees to the full financial restitution as outlined, with the additional provisions regarding future disclosure and non-contact. The judge reviewed the documents before her. Mr. Morgan, you understand that this settlement resolves only the civil claims, not the criminal charges you still face. Alex nodded, then cleared his throat. Yes, Your Honor. Very well. She signed the document with a decisive stroke. The court approves this settlement. Mr. Morgan will return all misappropriated funds plus interest, surrender all claims to properties or assets connected to Ms. Blackwood or her family, and abide by the non-contact order in perpetuity. It was over. Just like that. No dramatic speeches, no last-minute revelations. Just the quiet machinery of justice, grinding forward. As we gathered our materials to leave, I caught Alex watching me. Not with hatred or anger, but with something that looked almost like wonder. He'd underestimated me from the beginning. They all had. Outside, autumn had painted Boston in vivid golds and reds. I breathed deeply, filling my lungs with cool, crisp air. "Congratulations," Richardson said, falling into step beside me. "The criminal sentencing is next month, but with the plea agreement, the outcome is essentially determined." 5 years. Alex would serve at least 3 for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted poisoning. The evidence had been too overwhelming for even Wexler's creative defense strategies. "And Vanessa?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Richardson's expression tightened slightly. "Still in Switzerland, beyond our immediate reach. But the international warrants are active. It's only a matter of time." Vanessa had fled 2 months into the proceedings when Alex's plea deal made it clear he would testify against her. She'd managed to transfer herself to the European office of her design firm and disappeared into the banking privacy of Geneva. But her passport had been flagged, her accounts frozen. Her world had shrunk to a gilded cage of her own making. "My father's heart attack?" I asked. "Any update?" "Stable," Richardson assured me. "I spoke with your mother this morning. The doctors are optimistic." The second heart attack had come just weeks after Vanessa's escape, triggered, perhaps, by the stress of watching his family implode so publicly. I'd been at the hospital every day, watching my once formidable father struggle to regain his strength, my mother maintaining her vigil with quiet determination. "I should head there now," I said, checking my watch. "The afternoon visiting hours start soon." Richardson nodded. "Of course. I'll call with any updates from the prosecutor's office." I thanked him and headed toward the parking garage, but something made me pause, turn, and look back at the courthouse. 6 months ago, I'd walked into that building terrified of what would become public, what would be revealed. Now I left it lighter, unburdened by secrets. The hospital room was bright with afternoon sunlight and fragrant with fresh flowers, arrangements sent by friends and colleagues who had rallied around my father with surprising loyalty. The scandal had made headlines, of course. Boston socialite. Drugs, sister's wedding champagne and trust fund plot had splashed across every local paper and rippled through national media. But instead of the social ostracism my mother had feared, there had been an outpouring of support. My father sat propped up in bed, color finally returning to his cheeks. My mother occupied her usual chair beside him, a stack of cards and letters, in her lap. "Elena?" he greeted me, his voice stronger than yesterday. "Good news?" "The settlement is finalized," I confirmed, leaning down to kiss his cheek. "Everything as agreed." Relief crossed both their faces. My mother reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "Now perhaps we can begin to put this behind us," she said. I settled into the chair opposite her. Parts of it, yes. The legal proceedings, the financial untangling, but the rest? I shook my head. We don't put it behind us. We carry it forward, but differently. My father nodded slowly. Wiser, he agreed. More honest with ourselves. That was the unexpected gift of these painful months, the emergence of a new honesty within our family. My father, once distant and work-obsessed, now spoke openly about his regrets, his pride in my resilience. My mother, who had built her identity around maintaining appearances, had discovered a strength that had nothing to do with social standing. The foundation board approved the new direction, my father added, gesturing to the folder on his bedside table. Your community investment initiative launches next month. The Blackwood Foundation's transformation had been part of my healing process, redirecting its resources toward the substance abuse treatment centers and financial literacy programs I'd advocated for before the wedding. The programs Vanessa had so vehemently opposed. That reminds me, my mother said, retrieving her tablet. Olivia. Chen sent the final designs for the new logo and website. She's captured exactly the tone we discussed. Less elitist, more accessible. I smiled, recalling Olivia's excitement when I'd hired her small design firm for the rebranding. A year ago, my mother would have insisted on a prestigious agency with the right connections. Now she was enthusiastically partnering with a startup, founded by a first-generation college graduate from Dorchester. Perfect timing, I said. The feature in Boston Magazine comes out next week. Foundations of Change, Reimagining Philanthropy After Betrayal. My father raised an eyebrow. Bold title. Bold is all I have left, I replied with a small smile. Timid didn't serve me very well. The journalist who interviewed me had been surprised by my willingness to discuss everything openly. The betrayal, the drug champagne, the aftermath. Most people in your position would want to bury this story, not amplify it, she'd commented. Burying uncomfortable truths is what allowed this to happen in the first place, I'd told her. I'm done with silence. We chatted a while longer, about hospital routine, my father's improving test results, the changing leaves visible from his window, normal conversations that felt precious after so much turmoil. As visiting hours came to a close, my father asked for a moment alone with me. My mother kissed him gently and stepped out, mentioning something about finding decent coffee. Elena, he began once we were alone. There's something I need to say. He adjusted himself higher against the pillows, wincing slightly. When I established your trust fund, I intended it as security, not burden. I never imagined it would become a target on your back. Dad, you couldn't have known. He raised a hand. Please let me finish. I've been thinking about this during all these quiet hospital hours. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Wealth without purpose is dangerous. It attracts the wrong people, creates the wrong incentives. I see that now. I waited, sensing he had more to say. Your sister. Somewhere along the way, she began to see money as an end in itself, not a means to something meaningful. Perhaps that's partly my fault. I emphasized achievement, status, success, but not always purpose. We all made choices, Dad, I said gently. Vanessa's choices weren't your responsibility. Perhaps not, he conceded. But the environment that shaped those choices, the values implied by my focus on certain things over others, I bear some responsibility there. He sighed. What I'm trying to say, inelegantly, is that I'm proud of how you're using your resources. The foundation redirection, the scholarship fund, your insistence on transparency, you're creating meaning, not just managing money. Tears pricked my eyes. My father had always been sparing with praise, especially regarding business decisions. This validation meant more than he could know. Thank you, I said simply. He reached for my hand. I've updated my will, he continued. In light of everything, you'll be the sole trustee of the family assets, with provisions for your mother's lifetime security, of course. I started to protest, but he squeezed my hand. It's not a burden I'm placing on you, he assured me. It's a vote of confidence. You've proven you have the judgment, the integrity, and the vision to steward the family legacy towards something meaningful. After leaving the hospital, I drove to the waterfront, parked, and walked along the harbor path. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the water, sailboats bobbing gently in the distance. I needed space to process everything, the Court settlement. My father's words. The magazine interview set to publish next week. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Dinner tonight to celebrate the settlement? Menton at 8? I smiled, typing back, perfect. Bring the files on the Brighton development. Celebration and productivity. Maya had become more than my forensic investigator. During these months, she'd become a business partner. Together, we'd established Clarity Partners, a consulting firm specializing in financial transparency for charitable foundations. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family's scandal had created the perfect launching pad for a business focused on preventing similar situations. Already, we had a waiting list of clients, family foundations, corporate giving programs, donor-advised funds, all suddenly concerned about their own potential vulnerabilities after the Blackwood story broke. Pain transformed into purpose. I continued walking, letting the rhythmic sound of waves against the seawall soothe my thoughts. A young woman jogged past, then slowed and turned back toward me. "Excuse me," she said tentatively. "Are you Elena?" "Blackwood?" I nodded, bracing myself. This had happened occasionally since the story went public, strangers approaching with morbid curiosity or uncomfortable questions. But the woman surprised me. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "I read about what happened to you, and it gave me the courage to question some things in my own relationship. Things that didn't add up." She twisted her hands together nervously. "Anyway, I left him last month. Best decision I ever made." I was momentarily speechless. I'm glad you found clarity," I finally managed. She smiled. "That's exactly it, clarity, seeing clearly for the first time in years." She gave a small wave and continued her jog, leaving me standing there, stunned. It wasn't the first such encounter I'd had. Since going public with my story, I'd received dozens of messages from people who found resonance in different aspects of the betrayal. Some who'd experienced financial exploitation, others who'd recognized manipulation within their own families, still others who simply found courage in witnessing someone choose truth over comfortable pretense. I hadn't anticipated this ripple effect when I decided to speak openly. I'd simply known I couldn't heal in secrecy and shame. But now these connections with strangers had become one of the most meaningful outcomes of the entire ordeal. By the time I reached Menton that evening, I'd made a decision. Maya was already seated at our usual corner table, files neatly arranged beside her place setting. "To justice," she said, raising her glass as I sat down. "And to you, for seeing it through." I clinked my glass against hers. "And to what comes next." "Which is?" She raised an eyebrow, sensing my shift in energy. "I want to expand Clarity's mission," I said. "Beyond foundations and financial transparency. I want to create a resource center for people experiencing hidden manipulation, financial, emotional, familial. A place that offers both practical tools and emotional support." Maya studied me thoughtfully. "Inspired by the woman who approached you last week? The one with the boyfriend who was draining her accounts? Her, and the dozen others who've reached out. There's a need here, Maya. People who are being gaslighted about their finances, their perceptions, their instincts, just like I was." She nodded slowly. "It would require significant investment. New staff, different expertise, expanded facilities." "I have the resources," I reminded her. "And now, finally, I have absolute clarity about how to use them." Maya smiled. "Trust fund justice," she mused, "has a certain ring to it." "I was thinking the Clarity Project," I countered. "Less about the money, more about the mission." We spent the rest of dinner outlining the vision, a center that would offer financial forensic services, legal guidance, psychological support, and practical assistance for people discovering hidden betrayals. By the time dessert arrived, we had the skeleton of a business plan. "You know," Maya said as we prepared to leave, 6 months ago, you were getting ready for a honeymoon with a man who wanted to destroy you. Now, you're building something that will help others avoid the same fate." She shook her head admiringly. Talk about transforming pain into purpose. The phrase stayed with me as I drove home that night, back to the brownstone I'd purchased in Beacon Hill, not far from my parents' home, but distinctly my own space, decorated with clean lines and warm colors that reflected my personal aesthetic, rather than family tradition. Inside, I kicked off my shoes and settled onto the window seat overlooking the quiet street below. My phone buzzed with an alert from one of the international banking contacts Maya had established. Subject line: Vanessa Blackwood Funds Transfer Attempt, Zurich. So, my sister was on the move again, trying to access new accounts. The net was tightening. It was only a matter of time before the authorities caught up with her. I set the phone aside, choosing not to engage with that particular struggle tonight. Vanessa's story would unfold as it needed to, with or without my active participation. I'd done my part by speaking the truth, providing the evidence, standing firm in the face of her manipulations. The rest was up to justice systems and her own choices. Instead, I opened my laptop and began drafting the mission statement for the Clarity Project. The words flowed easily, powered by conviction born of experience. We believe everyone deserves to see their reality clearly, free from manipulation and hidden agendas. The Clarity Project transforms painful personal experiences into collective wisdom, offering both practical tools and emotional support for those discovering betrayal in its many forms. Because clarity isn't just about seeing what's wrong, it's about envisioning what could be right. I paused, reflecting on my own journey from blindness to vision. 6 months ago, I'd been a woman who compromised to keep peace, who looked away from uncomfortable truths, who trusted without verification. Now I stood firmly in a new identity, not cynical, but clear-sighted, not bitter, but purposeful, not defined by betrayal, but empowered by my response to it. The wedding that was meant to bind me to a lie had instead freed me to live in truth. My phone rang. A FaceTime call from my mother. "Good news," she said when I answered, her face filling. The screen, the hospital visible behind her. "The doctors are releasing your father tomorrow. His last tests came back strong enough for home recovery." Relief flooded through me. "That's wonderful. Do you need me to help get the house ready?" "Actually," she said, looking slightly embarrassed, "I've hired a service, professional organizers. They're coming tomorrow morning to rearrange things for optimal recovery conditions." She shook her head, smiling ruefully. "Can you imagine? Me, hiring strangers to decide how my home should be arranged?" I laughed, genuinely delighted by this small but significant evolution. My mother, releasing control, accepting help, prioritizing function over appearance, these were profound shifts in her worldview. "I'm proud of you, Mom," I said. She looked surprised, then touched. "What an odd reversal. I should be saying that to you." "We can both be proud of each other," I suggested. "Growth isn't limited by age." After we hung up, I returned to my laptop, adding a final paragraph to the mission statement. Clarity isn't a destination, it's an ongoing practice. We learn to see more clearly every day, to question more bravely, to stand more firmly in our truth. And in doing so, we create ripples that extend far beyond our individual lives, touching others who are still finding their way through the fog. The next morning dawned clear and bright, autumn sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows. I woke early, energized despite the late night. Today, I would visit my father as he returned home, meet with Richardson about the final legal details, and have dinner with the journalist to review the Boston Magazine piece before publication. But first, my morning ritual. I made coffee and carried it to my small home office, where a simple wooden frame hung on the wall opposite my desk. Inside was a champagne flute, the very one from my wedding reception, preserved not as a memento of trauma, but as a reminder of the moment I chose to see clearly, to act decisively, to save myself. Beside it hung a calligraphy quote I'd commissioned. "The truth will set you free, but first it will make you really uncomfortable." I smiled at that, acknowledging both the wisdom and the understatement. Uncomfortable barely began to describe the journey from that wedding reception to today. But free? That part was undeniably, gloriously true. My phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar international number. I opened it cautiously. "You were right. About everything. I should have listened. Vanessa." I stared at the message. Emotions, washing through me in waves. Surprise, vindication, wariness, and beneath it all, a faint echo of the sisterly connection we'd once shared, or perhaps had only pretended to share. I didn't respond immediately. This message required contemplation, not reaction. Was it genuine remorse or another manipulation? A moment of clarity or a strategic move as authorities closed in? The old Elena might have rushed to forgive, to smooth things over, to pretend wholeness where there was still brokenness. But I wasn't that Elena anymore. I set the phone aside and returned to my coffee, watching the morning light strengthen across the city. Whatever Vanessa's message meant, whatever came next in that complicated relationship, I would face it with the same clarity that had guided me through these transformative months. The future stretched before me now, not the one I'd once planned, with white veils and false promises, but something more authentic. Leading the Clarity Project, guiding the reimagined family foundation, supporting my parents through their own evolution, building connections based on truth rather than convenience or appearance. And perhaps someday, when the wounds had fully healed, exploring romance again, but with eyes wide open, heart protected by wisdom rather than walls. For now, though, I was content in this moment of perfect clarity, savoring the strength that comes from surviving what was meant to destroy you, and the profound satisfaction of creating meaning from what once felt meaningless. Sometimes the most beautiful journeys begin with a betrayal. Sometimes the truest love story is the one you write for yourself. Sometimes the most important vow isn't the one you make to someone else, but the promise you make to honor your own truth, no matter what. That champagne glass hadn't just saved my life that wedding night. It had helped me discover what my life was truly meant to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.